good afternoon, everybody. My name is Marjorie Kostelnik. I'm Dean of the College of Education and Human Sciences here at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and I also happen to be a member of the Presidential Search Committee. On behalf of the Search Committee and the university, I'd like to welcome you and thank you for being here today. Well, I'm here today to introduce you to Commissioner, I guess, is the correct term, Hank Bounds, and he is here from the state of Mississippi. And you've had access to his resume, you've seen some information about him on UNL Today, and I certainly urge you to go to the presidential search site, and you'll get lots of information. But what I think you need to know bare bones, and he's going to tell you a little bit about himself, is that he received both his bachelor's and master's degrees in education from Southern Mississippi University and his doctorate in education from the University of Mississippi. He comes to us in a very interesting path because he's been an educator from day one. Classroom teacher, principal, superintendent, commissioner of education, and a person who has been the chief officer for education in the state of Mississippi, so very similar to our commissioner of education here, and did such a great job at that he was invited to look at higher education and to become the commissioner of higher education for the state of Mississippi. And so he's going to tell you the institutions that are involved there and really what that job means. The reason that the committee, some of the reasons that the committee brought him here today is because when he was in the initial interview, we found him to be really smart, very knowledgeable about educational issues all the way from preschool children through graduate school and everything in between. We found him to be very sincere and a visionary thinker. We also saw him as someone who had some experience working with institutions of higher education of all kinds, different missions, different sizes, different loyalties across the state, and believe it or not, a few little rivalries from one campus to another. And he was able to tell us about some ways in which he could actually help those institutions see themselves as a more unified, more comprehensive system, while at the same time letting them shine in their own right. And there was an appreciation for their unique and individual missions. And those are some of the things that the people of Nebraska and our faculty and staff here at the University of Nebraska said that they were looking for in a candidate. And so without further ado, please help me welcome Dr. Hank Bounds.
Thanks everybody for being here. I know that it's the last week of classes before finals, and so I know students are engaged in what they need to be engaged with, and so those of you who are here, I appreciate it. I can typically pick the students out of the room at this time of the year because stress is written all over their face, and so I appreciate your taking the time to be here. I'll do a few things today. One, just personal information about me. Two, a little bit about my background and how that background sort of shows some unique parallels that prepared me for this opportunity. And then maybe take a look into the future with you a bit. But let me start by introducing you to my lovely wife, Susie, who is also an educator. She's a full-time mom right now. We have two children, a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old. And as you can imagine, when we started talking to a 13-year-old and 10-year-old about moving 15 hours away from home, well, we've had lots of conversations about what that might look like. We actually took a trip out a couple weeks ago just to make certain that this is where we would want to raise a family. It's pretty important to the two of us that We think about our children just as Nebraskans think about their children. You know, we want good quality of life for them. We want them to have good educational opportunities. We want them to have higher ed opportunities. And so it was important to us to sort of come and see it and feel it and understand what the city would look like that we would live in. Just a quick story about my daughter Caroline. She's a big Mississippi State fan. And Mississippi State looks a lot like UNL. It's a land-grant institution, 23,000 students. She likes it for several reasons. We have family that went there, and so they're always talking about Mississippi State. But she also likes it because when we go to the football games at halftime, the dairy store, the food science group, provides ice cream. And so when we visited, we came over to the East Campus and made certain we took a stop by the dairy store. And so we're good with a 10-year-old. We've got a little work to do with a 13-year-old still, but we've got one convinced anyway. So my background. As Marjorie pointed out, I haven't spent my entire career in higher education. I've been an educator all my life. I've been focusing on changing lives in the way that education has changed my opportunities. My father went back later in life and obtained a college degree, but I am sort of a true first-generation college student, traditional college student. Grew up and never really thought that I would have the opportunity to go to college. And so that I stand before you just goes to show the power of education, and that I feel like I'm really sort of living the American dream to run the university system in Mississippi, and to be able to have this conversation with you is really, really encouraging and exciting for me. So university system in Mississippi, obviously all universities are unique and different, but there are interesting parallels. We have 8 universities and an academic health science center. We have about 85,000 students, depending on, you know how that works when you count them. We're probably closer to 90,000 if you count everybody once that attends one course throughout the calendar year. So 90,000 or so, $4 billion budget. We're the only level one, have the only level 1 trauma hospital, the only children's hospital in the state. We have 2 large research Tier 1 institutions that look very much like UNL. We have regional campuses that look very much like UNO. We have an urban campus that looks, UNK, we have an urban campus that looks very much like UNO. And so there are real interesting parallels. You are much closer to being a system than we are, I would say, in that I really see this as one university. I know that you have separate campuses. Each of those campuses have real strengths. Each of the campuses have the ability to really contribute to Nebraska and to our nation and to the world, and that's important. What I don't see here is some of the things that we struggle with in Mississippi. We have 8 universities, but only about 35,000 more students than you have, and so limited resources. The ability to move the needle is difficult with limited resources, obviously. We also have a level of competition that I don't know that it may not exist here. Athletics in Mississippi they're pretty important, just as they are here to you guys. So we have 2 SEC schools. So if you think about University of Mississippi and Mississippi State, there's intense rivalry there, and figuring out how to move them off the courts, off the playing fields, and into the laboratories and classrooms, and getting them to collaborate has been a real challenge, and I think we've been really successful. We're doing so many good things together. We're really moving the needle on educational attainment. We're growing enrollment year over year. We're improving retention rates year over year. We're increasing advancement efforts year over year. Really good things are happening. A large research portfolio. We have an ARS in Mississippi, 1 of 5, just as you have one here in Lincoln, Nebraska, so lots of parallels. We have lots of centers and institutes. You have, I think, really important institutes that have the ability to impact what the future of the state looks like, the future of this nation, and the future of our world. Water for Food, the Kiewit Institute over in Omaha, the NSRI, just institutes that have enormous potential that I think have to be really institutionalized over the next couple of years. We have to have a real focus there and then think about what the next phase should look like. So let me move to my third point, and that is why it is that I would like to be in this position. You do have resources. You do have all of the levers that are needed to be able to be aspirational for our nation. The University of Nebraska needs to be a giant in higher ed. What happens here is bigger than just the state of Nebraska. You have an opportunity to really think about how you make a national and global difference. And that's exciting to me in the last part of my career. I spent 25 years in Mississippi, had a wonderful opportunity. If I don't move here, I'm going to be happy there. I love the state. I love the people. We're doing really good work, and I'll continue that good work. I think here, though, I can think very differently. I can think bigger than a state or a region. We can think together nationally what good really looks like, how we solve the problems that our nation, our country faces. It's a good laboratory when you think about it. You have a good mix of rural and urban. You have an urban institution that can think about the problems of the day in urban America, from pollution to transportation, how you research those issues, how you bring the power of the university to bear on those issues. You think about rural America and what's happening to small communities around this country and how they're drying up, and how if you drive through many places, you see more plywood on buildings than you want to see because buildings are boarding up because the economy just can't make it. So we have an opportunity to think about how you bring all these wonderful resources to bear on economic development, how you engage the business community. One of the things that I think that universities have to think about differently going forward is that we have to clearly understand that we really do have to be the engine that drives economic development for our state and for the region. And so when I think about economic development, I think about job opportunities for our citizenry. And when you think about growing jobs, you really do have to understand that we have to really increase educational attainment. You guys are doing really good work, but to be super competitive in the U.S. today, you really have to ramp that production up. You have to think about how you deal with the 300,000 Nebraskans that have some educational attainment beyond high school. It's very different for a traditional university setting to think about that, how we sort of are nimble, how we look at 25, 26, 30-year-olds who may be geographically bound, that have some educational attainment. They're harder to educate because their access to courses doesn't look the same way as a 19-year-old, 18, 19-year-old freshman. And so how we are nimble with our resources, how we attack those issues so that we can grow our economy. For me, I make lots of decisions based on what would be good for Will and Caroline. And so when I think about that, I often say to myself, what is it that I have to do where I'm working to, number one, make certain that this would be good for Will or Caroline? Because that's the yardstick that I should use to measure what good looks like. And so if I would want my child to attend an institution, that's a pretty good gauge to use. The other thing is I want to make certain that I'm thinking about growing jobs in a way, and to grow jobs you have to grow educational attainment, so that if Will and Caroline choose to stay in their home state, or at least they do have the choice, I don't want them to get to a point where they have to go to another state because job opportunities aren't available where they live. It may, if they choose to go somewhere else, I won't be completely happy about it, but I won't be unhappy about them leaving because it's their choice. I don't want the choice to be made for them because we weren't thoughtful enough we weren't thinking 10 years ahead about what the economy would look like. We're not being thoughtful about what type of mix of courses and opportunities that we should be offering for our young people. And so I'll be very focused on what the future looks like. And I get reminded of that every day that I wake up and wake up Will or Caroline and see them, or every time I kiss them goodnight. That keeps me really focused on the future and making certain that I'm meeting the needs of them, because if it's good for them, then it's good for everybody else. So my philosophy on the system approach, some of you may be interested in that. Marjorie and I had this conversation. From my chair, I think it's important that you hire good executives at the campus level, and then not only let them, but expect them to do their job. I don't want to run each campus. I don't have time to do that. I think my job is to make certain that we're really thinking about the future, and in order to do that, we've got to make certain that we have the best faculty and the best facilities for faculty. So that means we've got to really be thoughtful about competitive compensation. Got to make certain that we are offering facilities that are attractive, so that we can retain the best faculty and staff, and so that we can recruit the best faculty and staff. If we're going to be a difference maker, if we're going to be a giant in higher education, we've got to be really thoughtful about how we resource our people. And I think it's my job as president or as commissioner in Mississippi to go after those kind of resources, whether it's philanthropic, state resources, or federal resources. I always talk about the university world being an investment agency as opposed to a consumer agency. It's sometimes hard to get politicians to see beyond a 4-year window because that's just the world that they live in. So I spend a lot of time, and if I come here, I'll spend a lot of time trying to paint a picture of what 10 years from now will look like, and how investment today is just like a retirement income. You would absolutely tell your 23, 24-year-old child who just entered the work world that you don't need to wait till you're 30 to start saving for retirement. You start right now because it makes a difference long term. That's the exact same way that it works in higher education. We have to make an investment today for the benefit that we're going to see down the road. The last thing I'll do is talk about why each campus is important. Every campus is different, and I recognize that there's going to be this push and pull among campuses. There's always going to be this tension that exists between Omaha and Lincoln. There's going to be a tension that is out there that for Kearney, or what's happening at the medical center. Tension is not a bad thing. As long as we recognize strengths and opportunities for all the campuses, lift up those strengths, think about, my role, as I see it, is how do you make the sum bigger than the parts? And if a president can lead with that kind of focus, a system like this can really make a difference in our nation and world. And I know that we have limited time, so why don't I stop and at least attempt to answer any questions that you may have.
You've laid out a very attractive vision for what you think the University of Nebraska system can be. What do you see as the obstacles to achieving that, and how would you overcome them?
I think there are some obstacles. I don't think they're large. I think if we're not careful about valuing each campus and the contributions that those campuses make, if we get into a place where competition rules the day as opposed to cooperation and collaboration, that's an obstacle that can slow us down. Resources can be an obstacle. Faculty compensation, staff compensation is an obstacle. When you're thinking about bringing in researchers that can bring with them a research portfolio, when you're thinking about bringing in faculty or trying to retain faculty that can lift the profile of a particular degree program or area, compensation matters. All things, everything else being equal, compensation can keep this institution from being what it needs to be. And so, those are a couple of factors. We need to make certain that we really do a good job of communicating to the business world what our needs are. In Mississippi, we've been very successful in our efforts to grow enrollment, to grow philanthropic giving, to deal with legislative issues because we've really engaged the business community. Sometimes that can be seen as a threat by faculty, and so we've tried to work really hard to create opportunities for conversation that, where we're not running into each other, but we're trying to figure out how to help each other be successful. I try to look at it as we produce, we're both each other's customer, and if we can enter with that kind of spirit, then, really good things can happen. I think we need to think very differently about how we, an obstacle could be what's happening on the national landscape with funding the federal agencies that provide research dollars. This movement toward team science, the F&A doesn't cover expenses like it should anymore. How we better engage ag. I think the IANR is really doing good, but I think there's lots of potential there. I think there's lots of research potential, particularly if we can. I know you have a pool of dollars that allows you that you can leverage against research opportunities. We need to grow that 2 or 3 fold if we're going to really grow that part of the business. From the medical center side, if you think about all the changes in healthcare, that's a real concern. I have a real concern about the obstacles in place there and what's happening with, provider reimbursements. It's an enormous part of your overall budget. When that gets moved around, how does that impact the financial stability of everyone else? So there are a number of obstacles, but as long as we understand what those obstacles are and very aggressively attack them, I feel really good about the obstacles that are here versus the obstacles in other places.
My name's Ken Nickerson. I'm interested in the role of non-tenure track faculty in Mississippi and how you would view them here. Is it an increasing percentage of the faculty are being hired as non-tenure track? What do you see their role as? How do you see protecting them? How do you see, is there an optimal percentage? What roles do you see them having versus tenure track faculty?
So in Mississippi it is a bit different because we have campuses that are so diverse. At some places we have a much smaller non-tenure faculty group. In other places we have larger for varying reasons. But it's really been based on a business model and it's been faculty driven. I think it's important that faculty help us to figure out what that pathway should look like. In some places the faculty has said we need non-tenure positions for people who are really good in the classroom or really good in the laboratory. They're comfortable with not going through a tenure process because if they go through a tenure process, the rules that are in place, they can't do what they're really good at doing. And I think we ought to leverage the strengths of the various campuses. And I just don't know enough about your faculty to understand what that would look like. But I could give you I could talk about Tier 1 research universities versus small regional campuses, the ability to bring faculty in. Sometimes it's just opposite of what you think. It's hard to recruit to a rural area where compensation is not where it needs to be, and so tenure is an important issue. And so some folk might think that, well, at a regional campus like that, you might have more non-tenured faculty, when the truth of the matter is you really need that as a carrot to bring them in and keep them. And so I think the faculty really has to inform those kinds of decisions. I think it's important that obviously the chancellors, but also as president, I have a good relationship with the faculty senate. I've really used that as a tool to help me understand what the issues are on campus, the best way to move the university forward. And the truth of the matter is the answer is not going to be the same for any one institution, other than there are real benefits to tenure and non-tenure, and we ought to really understand that and understand the importance that both groups bring.
My name is Dane Kiambi from the College of Journalism. We live in a very competitive world, and there is a need to continue exposing our students to different cultures around the world. Study abroad programs have become very popular, and I would like to know how you do it at Mississippi, and how you think you can do it here differently, or to capitalize on some of the programs we have here to make them better.
Sure. So study abroad programs are really important to me. It's the tough part of that is we live in a very dangerous world. So how you do that in a way that ensures student safety is important. But the education that an individual receives at a university is more than what they learn in the classroom. It's really, I'm really interested in my children, the students that I work with, being able to navigate a global society. The world is much smaller than it was when we were in college. Our students have to be able to engage people from different backgrounds, from different cultures. We have, on some campuses, we have, most all of our students have the opportunity to do study abroad. In some places that's limited. There's a real strategy around that. Some of it has to do with resources, and that we're resource poor. I think it's really important to have the right mix of a population on a campus so for UNL, for example, clearly UNL has absolutely got to be about serving the needs of Nebraska. But one of the best ways to do that is to make certain that you're appropriately reaching out beyond the borders of Nebraska. Thinking about, what are the students that we need to bring into Nebraska, from outside of Nebraska, from nationally, but also what does a great education look like? Who do these students need to be exposed to? What kind of learning takes place outside of the classroom? And so I know that you have an effort to give every student at UNL that opportunity. For us, when we think about trying to attract the best and brightest students. Those students have real opportunities, right? I mean, if you max out SAT, ACT, you have a choice of where you want to attend. And so the scholarship that has to go with that, it really becomes competitive. All of those kinds of students, in order to attract them, have to have a study abroad opportunity, because those students get it. And if the students who are at the high end of the academic achievement get it, we've got to make certain that we are communicating to everyone else and giving them those kind of opportunities. Will and Caroline, they may work in their job may be in China. The global market, the marketplace for jobs is so incredibly different today, and we are doing students a real disservice if we're not really thoughtful about how we build robust engagement opportunities. But it goes beyond students. I think that the same is true about faculty. But I think that also holds true in terms of how we work with other nations. Your Water for Food Institute is really focused on what the global population is going to do over the next 25 or 30 years. The data tells us increase in population by about 40%. That's an enormous growth. That's a huge strain on our resources. How do we take limited water and apply it in a way to increase yield on food production? And if we only do that in the U.S., we've only solved a fraction of the problem, because the world's population is not in the U.S., it is other places. And so we've got to think about how we connect with other countries over time, and that's really just part of globalization. So we've got to be really focused, student level, faculty level, but also how we work with the major problems that our world faces today.
Mr. Commissioner, Let's put this back in Mississippi and then bring it to Nebraska.
Okay.
What's one thing other than fiscal resources that you would change at Mississippi if you could, and how do you see it different in Nebraska?
If I had a magic wand, I wish that I could change overnight the preparation level that students receive K through 12. That would immediately be a game changer for Mississippi. So here's what we face in Mississippi. I talked a little bit about this earlier. Lots of poverty, lots of intensity of poverty. So entire communities are living in abject poverty. And what happens in those places is you get this large group of people. I'm using a broad brush here. It's not always the case, but you get boys and girls growing up in environments that aren't print rich or vocabulary rich. So they enter kindergarten with the vocabulary level of a 2 or 3 year old. So vocabulary levels of 2 or 3 year olds, of kindergarten students, is a very good predictor of future reading ability. And so if you're starting way behind, the potential, we can move them. There are success stories, but it's very difficult to move large populations to proficiency in reading by the 3rd grade, which means they're going to be successful in middle school, which means they're going to be successful in high school, which means they're college ready. That has an enormous impact on an individual. They're just forfeiting opportunities if we can't get them to this level. But it's also forfeiting opportunities for the state of Mississippi. Because we know that if you have a college degree, you're going to be more likely to read to your children. You're going to be more likely to lead a healthy lifestyle. You're going to be less likely to get in trouble, go to prison. The benefits, I could go on and on and on about the benefits, and on and on and on about the negative things. And so the one thing that I could change would be to have an institute like Buffett Early Childhood that is really thoughtful about how they pair with extension and really thoughtful about how they pair with the medical center to deliver services in a way so that more of our children could enter kindergarten ready to be successful. That would have an enormous impact on higher education in Mississippi. And I know that seems really kind of odd for someone that runs a university system to talk about early childhood, but I really think that we all have to, in this world, have to take the long-term view and not the 4-year political view. We really have to think of 10 or 15 years in the future if we're going to change things. So how we resource that, so you told me I couldn't use resources, but at the end of the day, dollars matter. So what would I change here? You're putting me a little bit in the crosshairs here because I've read just about every document that's ever been written about any of your universities. I've really tried to study. I've watched every one of Harvey Perlman's YouTube videos on pearls of wisdom, pearls of knowledge. I wanted to start my conversation today by saying, I've been thinking. And but the problem is things always look different when you're on the ground, and written material really doesn't tell the full story. So maybe if I could be a little bit of a politician and not answer the question and say to you what I think I would do early, I would try to be as ubiquitous as possible. I would try to be a sponge. I would try to learn, really understand in a deep way the opportunities, the challenges, the strengths of each place, figure out where the rub is, figure out where the business community is, figure out what the relationship between the ag producers look like and what the extension service is doing. Really try to understand all of those pieces, and then get with lots of folks who understand it better than I do and start to paint a picture about what the future of Nebraska could look like. And I think if we're careful about how we do that, Nebraska really could be a giant. And that's what I'm interested in doing the last chapter of my career.
Welcome to you both to Nebraska. I have the honor and the privilege of working in collegiate recreation, which is, in my opinion, the other classroom. We do a lot of experiential things, and I'd like to hear your thing about more than just in the classroom, because we think that's one of the things we provide. So you've talked a lot about faculty, you've talked about facilities, those kinds of things, and we think we're a very good recruitment tool in terms of both our facilities and our programs. But can you speak just maybe in general to where you see the validity of the staff on a campus versus all the other entities?
I'm happy to. You know, we exist to meet the needs of students. Faculty are at the heart of the institution. The staff keeps it on the rail. And so if I have not spoken enough about the value of staff, I apologize. It's a critical link in the chain, you know, from helping to make certain that we have an environment that is opening, welcoming, safe, to ensuring that the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, to thinking about how we meet mental health issues, other kinds of health issues, how we provide outlets on the courts and the sports field. I mean, all of that, you know. So when I think faculty, I really think of that sort of in a broader term. There are lots of life's lessons that occur on the intramural fields that you may not necessarily get in the classroom. And they're important. You know, how to get along, how to compete, how to work in teams, that sometimes is easier to teach in that area. And so I really value the role that staff plays, and I would tell you that anytime that you hear me talking about increasing faculty salaries, increasing compensation, I always talk about faculty and staff compensation issues, because we need those folks that when they're doing good, we need to retain them as well. It's hard to replace experience. It's more expensive to replace experience. And so I place great value there. I don't know if I've completely answered your question, but I think that's a really important piece of what happens on a university campus.
Hello. I was wondering if you could embellish your answer or what you were talking about earlier about how we partner with businesses, about how you liaise with the legislature, you reach out to philanthropic groups, and how you would sort of, what I'm concerned about is our publicness. We're a public institution.
Sure.
And as we liaise more with private entities, perhaps that drives us away from our mission. And also, just on top of that, how you see the Board of Regents playing a role in all of this.
Okay, so that's a multi-part question. So if I miss part of the answer, please tell me. So it's clear that we have an educational mission. But I also think that we have to recognize that business and industry sees us as a supplier of talent. And I've been really frank with faculty, but I've also been really frank with business leaders. You know, what inevitably ends up happening is business leaders are sort of pushing back on faculty that you're not preparing individuals in the way that they need to be prepared. Faculty's always pushing back. And so we've been very intentional about how we put those two groups together to talk about how we work together. I mean, this is not a competition. This is about finding a healthy balance of what good looks like for the university, for the mission of the university, for our students, and making certain that they're prepared appropriately. And so I've tried to find ways where we could win, where we could have win-win kinds of scenarios. So for example, I think I mentioned earlier that I was asked to chair the effort, the strategic planning effort for the business community. And it gave me a great entry into their world, create an opportunity where I could have frank conversation with them. They could say, Hank, you don't know what you're talking about. I could say, you guys don't know what you're talking about. We could debate in that way without either side getting their feelings hurt. And so over time, what we've done is found ways that, found things that really make a difference for students and for faculty and for businesses. So one example would be, we have 8 universities. Back about this time a year ago, I was meeting with Mississippi Economic Council. Very powerful business organization, more than 1,000 members, have a leadership team of 40 or 50 business leaders, and we were talking about what this relationship should look like. And one of the leaders said, you know what would be really helpful? We're not a large business. We would love to offer internship opportunities, but we're not one of the big guys. You know, we're not a billionaire, a billion-dollar conglomerate. We don't have the wherewithal. We can't send someone to 8 different universities, and even if we send them to the land grant to Mississippi State, every department works differently in terms of how what those internships look like. And so I said, let us think about it. I brought presidents together, we brought faculty together, we brought lots of different groups together, and I said, can we figure this out for the business community? Long story short, we have a one-stop shop. Everybody still has, you know, all the parameters on what has to be completed. But now the small businesses and the large businesses can go in through one portal, create internships, offer internships. The relationship has increased unbelievably well. Those businesses love us now because they once thought that we were rigid and immovable, and now they're saying, well, they want to do the right thing for our businesses as well. It was smart. Campuses are saying, why didn't we do this before? This makes so much more sense. It's cost us a little money. We've had to staff it. We have people waking up in the morning, going to bed at night, thinking about how they make those connections. We have hand holders that hold the hand of the students and hold the hand of the business leaders. So that's just sort of an example of small ways that we found could be win-win. So now we're moving to other kinds of issues. What else is out there that would be productive for both the university world and the business world? And so that's sort of the approach that we've taken. And in some places, that relationship's grown faster. In some places, we've hit a wall, but we just kind of keep hitting that wall until we can find the soft spot. You asked then to talk about legislative issues. So our legislature is a little different. No, it's a lot different. We have 2 houses. We have 144 members or so, so much larger than 49. You have unicameral. The legislative piece is led by my office, whether it is on general legislation, appropriation bills, or bonding authority. We move with one single voice. We're much more powerful taking 8 universities and a medical center to the Capitol, telling the same story the same way every time, talking about resources in a way that makes sense. You are much stronger with all of your campuses going to the State House to talk about resources if you're telling the same story, recognizing that there are differences. And so I spend a lot of time with my staff and then staff on campuses with the various legislative liaisons, talking about what the right message is, what the ask should be, how we present the ask, how we talk about what that investment looks like. From Board of Regents, our board is really very good about understanding that they are a policy board. And they provide overall direction. They understand the strong commissioner model, and so the presidents report to me, and I report to the board, in very much the same way it is here. I recognize that I can't run 8 campuses. I can't run 4 campuses. You have to have people there that run those places. our board is really very good about understanding that they can't do that either, that it's important for them to stay at the policy level. We talk every month about roles and responsibilities. We talk about where and when is it appropriate for things to move up from the faculty level to move into policy. We talk about when is it appropriate for things to work the other way. So, for example, all campuses in this country are really focused on sexual violence. Some campuses do a better place than others. One of the places that I'm doing sort of a top-down, two of the places where I'm sort of doing a top-down is a system-wide approach to that issue. How do we bring the best experts to bear from student services, from medical background, from law enforcement, all of those places? How do we make certain that we have really good measures and controls in place? To one of my real concerns, because of my long work in schools, is around mental health issues. So I work every month with student body government presidents and ask them to lead initiatives. And so they're leading an initiative right now to think about what the model should look like on each of the campuses to help educate faculty, staff, but just maybe more importantly, their peers on what signs of distress look like, and then what the outlets are, how you get help, how you bring in resources. And so really for me, it's all about roles and responsibilities, and it's not always a straight line. For me, I tell people all the time, sometimes for me, as commissioner, it means I need to be at the tip of the spear, charging into the battle. Sometimes I need to stand beside people, and sometimes I need to follow. And I'll tell you, in this role, I think one of the real keys to being successful is to know when to step in each of those chairs. Did I fully answer your? There are a number of things that I'm really proud of. One of the most difficult challenges that I faced is our allocation model. How we take limited resources, spread them over 8 universities in a way that makes sense and produces results. We've had an allocation model in Mississippi since the early 90s. And just for my inability to explain it any better in mathematical ease, let's assume that back in the mid-90s we had 10 universities. They were all the same size, so they all received 10% of the dollars from the state. Let's assume that we fast forward today, we still have 10 universities. Some have 5%, some have 15%, but under the allocation model, they all still receive 10% of the dollars. That was really good if you were losing students or not growing as fast. It was not as good if you were a growing institution. Didn't really consider cost of course delivery, didn't really consider needs of the state. And so we've built a really pretty good model. We're not there yet. We still have work to do. But we did several things in the model. We recognize that the wherewithal of a large campus, the size that university can bring to bear, looks very different than a very small campus. And so we have an opening the doors amount of money that goes to each campus, and then of the dollars that are left, 90% goes through completed credit hours based on, we looked at a couple national call studies. So, national call studies tell us that freshman and sophomore liberal arts courses should be weighted at a level of 1, whereas maybe doctoral level engineering courses may be weighted as a 4 or a 5. And so really it was about weighting the cost for delivery and recognizing that and allocating dollars appropriately. And then we also recognized that the state had real challenges. And how do we use resources to push universities to really be thoughtful about how they tackle those challenges? So we have lots of poor students. If you've dealt with poor students, first-generation college students, you have to resource that in a different way to get them across the finish line. versus maybe a student that has a 30 on the ACT and then a fourth-generation college student. They know how to navigate the waters. They enter with a plan, hopefully. But we have institutions that have 90% Pell, where lots of an enormous percentage of those students are first-generation college students. And so to move Mississippi, we've got to really think about how we get those young people across the finish line. And so we're using dollars to reward that. So I'm really pleased with where we are. Still has hiccups. We still have challenges in terms of being able to find the right mix.
As you look out at higher ed, what challenges do you see for higher ed in the future?
I think there are lots of challenges. I worry about delivery systems. I worry about in 2030 what educational delivery is going to look like with MOOCs and online courses. We're building in Mississippi, just as you are here, spending a lot of money on brick and mortar. So we're taking 30 years of debt to pay for facilities that I wonder what that's going to look like in 2025. The story that I use to illustrate this is a conversation I was having with Will when he's probably, my son Will, when he's probably 6 years old. Just to preface it, if you told me that I had to take a course online, I would just say, just let me go run out and play in the interstate. I have no desire to do that. I'm not comfortable. Sort of this difference between technology immigrant and technology native. So Will was having Will, like many 6-year-olds will do, was asking me a series of questions. And it was, how big is a blue whale? It was just, one question after the other that I had no idea. And so about the fourth time that I said, well, I really don't know. I was doing something. And so about halfway through the question, he said, oh, never mind, Dad, I'll just go Google it. So you think about what that says about the future of delivery and how that may look differently, and the fact that we've really got to be thoughtful about 10 or 15 years in the future. Now, we really do have to not just live in the 4-year window where our students are in school now. We've really got to be careful when we go out and borrow a lot of money to build a facility, because we want to make certain that we can service the debt on dormitories or whatever down the road. So I think that's a real challenge, and I think that this disruptive technology era is going to continue to change the landscape of high school education, but it's certainly going to change the landscape for us in higher ed.
Okay,
Thanks everybody. Have a great day.